by two marauders in tow.
You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive.
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and as always, I'm joined by Julian Darius. Julian, how are you doing? You okay?
I'm doing okay. You know, in space, nobody can hear you yawn.
Okay, well, that'll be interesting. Controversial, if that's how we're starting. Yes, we are starting a little mini interlude to season 5, our post-apocalypse season, taking us up to Alien Romulus. We're going to be doing the first 4 and Alien Romulus Alien films, starting today with Alien from 1979. The crew of a commercial spacecraft encounters a deadly life form after investigating a mysterious transmission of an unknown origin. Starring, of course, Sigourney Weaver, Tom Skerritt, John Hurt, Veronica Cartwright, Harry Dean Stanton, Ian Holm, and Yaphet Kotto as the main crew.
And a cat.
And a cat called Jones. Yes. So let's get started then. So yeah, what are your initial thoughts then on Ridley Scott's 1979 Alien?
You know, it occurs to me I haven't seen this all the way through all that many times in the last 10 years or so. It's kind of one of these movies that you have in the back of your mind as a kind of staple, but you sort of like dimly remember. And every time I've gone back to it, you know, I've seen parts of it, I haven't made it through it, whatever. Every time I go back to it, I think, you know, well, this is interesting. It's not quite what I remember. There are things that I like about it, and I think everybody praises it for its influence. It has an enormous influence. You know, it's kind of the sci-fi horror movie, you know, par excellence, right? And, you know, we all know the stories of, like, you know, the guy in the alien costume looked shit, so they shot around it. And I am not taken with it. I have to say I was remarkably underwhelmed. There are good ideas here, you know. There's great designs, you know, especially with the crashed ship and the alien and all this. But I am so sick of, like, every scene is in strobe lights to hide detail. You know, like, there's gusts of vapor streaming everywhere, and in fact it's part of a joke, but then it's like, you know, every room doesn't make sense. I don't know what any of these rooms are for. Half of them are covered with water on the floor. You know, they're running around. The way everything is shot is with, like, you know, there are a number of shots where I don't even know what's happening, because you sort of see characters and then you cut to close-ups, like a 2-second close-up of the alien, so that you don't really see how shitty it looks. And then you cut back to, like, a reaction shot, and then you cut to somewhere else in the ship. I guess the alien was in the room with them. I guess it wasn't 2 rooms over, just kind of reacting. I mean, but I'm sort of forced to put that together over and over in my mind, and all of it is supposed to be connected by strobe lights. So I don't know. I mean, there's stuff this is doing well. It's definitely limited by its budget, but I think instead of feeling like it goes beyond that budget and succeeds more than I would expect, I just feel those limitations a lot more this time.
Well, okay, that's interesting.
Hot take.
Yeah. No, well, we shall discuss it. I mean, it is one of those. It's interesting. It is, like you say, it's a staple that, I think it's sort of like, you know, once you've watched it, you watch it a couple of times, and then it can just become sort of like a background entity, as it will, because you say he's influenced so many, and also the Xenomorph now is appearing in so many things. Lots of other films and comics and games and so on and so forth. That this almost becomes background noise for everything else that becomes sort of like the Alien franchise, as well as crossing over like the Predator franchise and that sort of thing. But there's something about this, and especially when we get through these films, each film is very different. I think we'll sort of see that as we go through these different films. But this to me reminds me of Outland. We've talked about that sort of industrial space, like blue collar space. That in that case it was mining. In this case, it's kind of mining, but they're returning. They're sort of a tugboat basically, pulling an absolute shit ton of ore. But you're right in a sense. I agree with what you're saying in a sense that although it's supposed to be industrial, the ship seems so badly maintained by Yaphet Kotto's and Harry Dean Stanton's character that it's kind of worrying that there is so much like water leaking and chains hanging like dangerously and all of its pieces. But I do like this aesthetic of it being kind of ragtag.
Oh, I do too. Yeah.
But to me, the thing I like that there's a separate. I like that because you have sort of like their communal areas. You have Mother, which is this sort of semi-artificial intelligence that allows them to communicate with home. I feel different to you. I think there are distinctions of areas in this ship. Now I don't know how it works geographically. I couldn't walk around the ship, but I fully understand that they are in, say, like the cockpit area. Like I know when they're in there. Like I know what that looks like with the monitors and
For sure. No, I agree. And the, stasis chamber and all that. That looks
yeah,
good.
yes.
Yeah.
So all those areas are defined to me, and then you have like the lower decks, if you will, the engine area, the sort of like the storage areas, the cargo holds, all those kinds of things are dark and unnecessarily dark.
Yeah. That's another thing that bothers me, right? It was just like, where are all the lights? Why is there water everywhere, but you don't have lights?
Yeah. Well, maybe that's the reason why. They're, we can't turn the lights on. It's electrical, dangerous.
No.
No, I don't know.
But
It
we
feels
know
like,
the real reason is because we don't. The whole movie is about not showing the alien,
yes,
right? Which is smart, right?
yeah.
I mean,
But I
it
agree.
builds
Like,
suspense, but
no,
yeah.
but the areas of the ship that have the most dangerous elements in them, including like random hanging chains with hooks on and cargo areas, are the darkest parts of the ship, which does feel a little bit anti-health and safety. So
Yeah, there's like water on the floor. There's big
yeah,
industrial spikes
yeah.
sticking out of the walls for you to impale yourself on. There's giant metal chains swinging. Not a light in sight.
Or a torch for that matter. No, everyone just sort of walks around, sort of like blindly through these things. Yeah. So I do appreciate that there's a little bit of silliness in that, but that kind of feels Ridley Scott. That sort of I know, and I appreciate as you say. I think it's twofold. You say it's to hide the alien. I think it's also to hide parts of the sets that
Mhm.
these were clearly filmed in, factories and warehouses and those kinds of things. They were, they weren't built. These were existing things. So they're trying to hide the fact that there's probably like 4 foot from the shot, there's a sign that just sort of says, like watch your head or, steel works this way or something like that. That
Number of days since accident.
yes, yeah, 0. Um, but yeah, there are things I really enjoy about this film, and I'll concede certain things. One of the things I think I like most about this film that I think I'll throw in, as you talk about, is the cast and the crew, and how to describe this. We've watched several films now over the time, over these seasons. We've watched a lot of films about crews or about people in a confined area. Going everything from like Event Horizon and films like that, even Outland. One of the when they're good, and I believe that they are a group of people trapped in a sort of an environment together, is when I feel that they're not being directed. So that, one of the things that we've watched films is when lines are delivered in order for another line to be delivered.
Hmm.
I like the fact that they talk over each other in this, and there's like bickering, and it feels natural-esque when they're arguing about things. Um, and not just about sort of like the shares when they talk about how much share they're going to get, but like later on when they're talking about like the flamethrower and other bits and pieces, like someone will come up with an idea, and before they finish talking through the idea, someone will go, "Well, that's a ridiculous idea. You can't do this, can't do that." Like it feels like a group of people that are getting more and more frustrated with each other, and so I like the way that the structure, the cast works.
Yeah, that's another thing that I think is certainly worth remarking on. And that's very different than the other films.
Mm,
Is that sort of naturalistic dialogue. I would say sometimes it really works. I think like that guy who says right,
yeah.
that's the only thing he says is pretty funny. Um, there's I like that kind of naturalistic approach. It certainly stands out in this film. Um, but I would also say that like this film has a lot of trouble conveying basic information. Um, and sometimes that information is kind of lost because they're talking to each other.
Okay.
Or you know what I'm saying? And
Hmm.
and I
Hmm.
sort of feel like you kind of go back to it and you know the basic plot, right? I mean, and I love the plot. I love the idea of the film. I mean, I think there's a lot that's really great here. And I love, Giger. I have books of his art. Um, so look, I mean, I'm a fan of this film. There's a lot that I like here, but I think that I see these downsides more, and I think that like those core ideas are what stay in the memory.
Yes.
A lot of the execution is, weird cuts between stuff, and it's not really a great scene. It's sort of hard to hear that dialogue. You kind of have to know explanations from, Wikipedia or something to sort of totally get some of the dialogue that you missed, or to understand why they're really doing X, Y, and Z,
Oh, I've still got
because
questions,
ultimately it
but
doesn't matter.
yeah, I've still got
Yeah.
some questions I want to raise today. So yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, those are just kind of things that I notice now more, as a 100-year-old man than I did when I was,
Mm.
initially watching this as a kid, thinking this was, awesome, and I love those designs, and it is a haunted house, in
Mm.
space, right? I mean, it does that a lot better than Event Horizon.
Oh yeah.
Um, I mean, this is the movie to reference for so much, and
And
it
a, and
deserves
a,
that status. I'm not trying to
yeah, yeah.
take that anything away.
An Event Horizon pastiches this and parodies this like endlessly, unsuccessfully. Um, yes. No, I know what you're saying. I agree there are certain elements where I'm like, I had to sort of wind back to sort of make sure I fully understood a conversation or an argument because some of it was muttered or said as a sort of a steam vent was being let off in front of someone or those kinds of things. So I agree with that. I feel that was intentional. I think, I can feel that Ridley Scott is trying this thing to try and keep it almost like fly on the wall. Like he's trying not to sort of be intrusive. He wants things to feel like he's just there observing this event that's happened with this crew. Um, but then you're right. But then they've also have to work around certain things, which then becomes slightly intrusive, especially towards the end of the film. It makes me think about it makes me wonder what he learned from this that he then took onto like Blade Runner and that sort of thing,
Mm,
where um, there are definite sort of attempts again. I think we even said then there's attempts in Blade Runner to have that naturalistic sort of exchange of dialogue where people do sort of talk over each other and exchange, but it's a lot clearer, I think, in Blade Runner than it is in even without forgetting the ridiculous narration and that film had, the original version had. Um, yeah, I can see what you're saying
well,
on that front.
and I think that Blade Runner gives you a better feeling, although not as much as I would like, for sort of like what life is like for these people. I mean, here you kind of get the, quarters, the command center, the sort of bridge area, and you get the sense that they're, you know, bored with each other, they're tired, they're stinky, they can't wait to get home. But like, what is it's a mining ship, it's enormous. Where's
Mm.
all this stuff they've mined?
Oh
They're on
no,
their way home.
no. So this is something. So the Nostromo is almost like a front end to a massive tanker. So
Hmm.
all that stuff that you see in it goes up and out. That's all stored. That's all ore and all this other stuff. Like that is cargo and all these other things. So the Nostromo itself actually isn't huge. Um. So yeah, they're
Well,
basically
I
like
mean, it's huge because it's mostly cargo space,
yeah.
right?
Oh yeah,
I
the
mean,
actual vessel itself is massive, but like the bit that they
right.
exist in is actually relatively small.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of get that idea, but I don't really understand from this film how that works when you see the exterior of the vessel. I mean, it's interesting, but I
Mm,
don't know, like, why is it so differentiated if it's mostly cargo base,
yeah.
I know it looks cool, for the most part, um, outside of like that lander with the Christmas lights underneath, and so that's a bit daft, but I mean, it looks cool for the most part, but, yeah, uh, yeah. I think that Blade Runner, you sort of have a sense of, partly because of those city scenes, kind of how people live. And here, I don't really understand the geography of the ship. You'd
Mm.
think that would matter with an alien loose on it. I mean, I don't know why it has those industrial sections, but they don't seem to be being used for ore or anything. Not that, I mean, these are minor complaints, but I mean, when that environment is so key to what you're running around in and going to be fighting in. And like, like, why do we have a room where it's dripping water in the
No, I
room
agree
from
with
an
this.
opening at the top?
No, this is something. I think it's something you and I have touched on with other things as well before. Is um, if you're going to have I mean, if you have a ship, like a military ship or a submarine, and you're out at sea, you have very finite space, so you don't waste any of that space. Like everything, every room is going to be used for a purpose. Like you can't just say, well, this area is for the dripping water and the chains. Like that's what that's for. No, like if you have and in space, I assume it would be very much the same, wouldn't it? Like this is an industrial ship. Every area would have to serve a purpose because otherwise you're just carrying empty space, and that's going to take up fuel and all that kind of stuff. So, um, yeah, they do need. I agree. It would be better if there was a bit more sort of, a geographical sort of explanation of the ship. And I don't need a floor plan, but like you should have a bit more of a sense of how it all fits together. Um, yeah. So no, I do agree with that. It does feel weirdly like and again, at the time, I can imagine you're watching this and going like, "Oh my God, this looks amazing. It's very different to what I'm used to seeing," or
Hmm.
it's becoming a part of that industrial science fiction sort of like aesthetic. Um, but you're right. When you go back to it now and you sort of apply this sort of logic, which I think as it's developed, you'll see in future installments of this and other sort of other franchises where they're like, no, we need to be sensible about this. Like this is an industrial ship or a military ship or whatever. Like you don't just have a random space that's for whatever.
Yeah, and I think it's only fair, like, we talk about how we review things, right? How to think
Mm,
about things. There's always this question of sort of like, how do you retroactively look at stuff, right? And sometimes, we'll look at something from, the 30s or the 50s and say, well, we're not bothered by the lack of special effects, right? That's not really fair to apply to it. Um, and there are some things that, maybe don't hold up as good as we'd like, but we understand it's really swinging for the fences there. It's doing something very different that was
mm.
very influential. But it seems to me if we're going to get to like installment 8 or 9, and have these kinds of criticisms, about the logic of the ship and what it is that they're doing out there, we should sort of apply that to the first.
Mm. No, I think you can't. You can sort of, I suppose, review on a sort of curve because you've got to have certain, um, concessions. I suppose you said like to budget and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. Yeah, if we're going to sort of, if I'm going to criticize Alien Resurrection for certain things, which I am going to criticize Alien Resurrection for certain
No.
things, then you're right. Then you've got to sort of apply a similar thing to this, and I do think the ship is a bit of a problem. I see why they do things, and I think that one of the things, for example, let's call out those hanging Hellraiser chains with the hooks on. One of the things is it becomes clear, well, at least becomes clearer later on as you started about hiding the alien and all this other stuff. Those chains look similar to the tail of the alien.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea that's being sort of projected is, because you've said about like Geiger's design and these, especially when they go into the alien ship, which we will talk about shortly. Everything in the industrial area is supposed to be like, we can't tell whether it is the alien, the xenomorph sort of, is it there, or is it a piece of industrial equipment? And obviously this becomes a key factor of the big finale as Ripley is trying to escape. That's, the what happens at the end of the film. So it's playing with that throughout the film. However, it never really gives you that as a almost like as a bullet point in the film to say this might be an issue later on, because it's so hidden in the dark that you don't sort of see it, in amongst the chains or in amongst a series of sort of air valves or canisters or something else. That trick is played to better effect, I would say, actually in Alien 3. Which they want to achieve here. So, yeah, I see what they want to do, but I don't think it's 100% successful in doing what it's doing to make the reveal at the end as I don't know, shocking or surprising.
Successful as it could be.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, and I think that, judging this on that curve, I mean, this is not that many years from Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
And, the sort of, although Star Wars is often credited as a kind of like used future aesthetic, it was still very bright, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all those aliens are very humanoid and bright, and sure, there's a giant space worm in the second, but I mean, it's it's very bright and human friendly. It's sort of the Oscar the Grouch is your alien,
Yeah.
and to its credit, this looks nothing like the other sci-fi that had gone before. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really make sense, and I think that again, I come back to the thing that this is amazing for is the central idea. It's we're encountering alien life. It's mysterious and unexplained and terrible. And then we're going to have to fight for our life on, a dark, terrible ship. And space is horrible. Like, all of these ideas are really very successful. When you start poking at any one of them, there's not a lot behind it.
Yeah. And I think that's fair, but because I think you can do that with a lot of films. And we've done that with a lot of films where, like, I would say it works better as a culmination of its parts. Like it works as that big piece. And you're right, if you start to sort of break it down a little bit, it does kind of, you could sort of really pick holes in it. I mean, I want to let's get to the plot then, because I think there is a key sort of parts of the plot where I have questions about some elements of this plot. So they are woken up. The crew are woken up from their status chambers early. They do all their they do all their ship checks, which I like. Again, like the fact that it is kind of ordered. They get up. The first thing they do, start checking the status of the ship and the cargo, and run through their checklists. realize that they aren't home. They're not even in our solar system yet. And they've been woken up because Mother, the ship's computer, has detected a repeating signal, which could be an SOS, coming from a planet. And so they set down, divide up, and this is where it sort of I have not issues. This is ridiculous, but basically sort of Veronica Cartwright's Lambert, John Hurt's Kane, and Tom Skerritt's Dallas all go out to investigate this. They see a ship, this big curved ship, and they're looking for the signal.
Horseshoe, kind of.
Yeah, this leaves the other guys on board, and Sigourney Weaver's Ripley is now in charge because we find out that Tom Skerritt and John Hurt are the two. Tom Skerritt's the captain. John Hurt's Kane is the second in charge. Why are those two going out? Like it feels again like top two in command off on a mission. Like they don't seem to have any. There's not like, oh, your skills are required for this mission. It's an odd choice.
Star Trek.
Well, that was what I thought. Actually, I agree. Like the fact when this is Picard and Riker going down to the ship, or Kirk and Spock going down, you're going like, it's kind of reckless. But I like all this, like this whole opening bit, including all the stuff, and they've realised that they're like 10 months further from home, and they've got all this other stuff. All this is really, I'm really sort of like nothing's happened, but I'm kind of engaged with all this. Like I like the way it works.
It's a little slow. The talking over each other is kind of like makes it a little hard, especially because I'm still you're still figuring out the details of what's going on. Like, okay, but I agree. The beginning is very good. And so they get down to the surface and, okay, you got the Christmas lights on the bottom of the ship, which just hanging out. I don't know why that annoys the hell out of me. That the Christmas lights drive me crazy. But they land and they go into, this horseshoe alien ship. So, all right, they've already completed a mining mission and are on the way home.
No, right? They haven't completed the mining mission. They are hauling mining ore. Okay. They're just a haulage company. So
I have never understood that.
Okay.
I've never once understood that in all of the times I've seen all of these movies.
Oh, really? Because it says
once understood that.
There's a statement in it where they refer to themselves as a haulage only, and that the contract is only for there and back. That's what their contract is for.
Yeah, there are so many little details like this that I find completely impossible to follow and impossible to keep in my mind. So here's another key one, right? It's kind of become part of alien lore that they have not encountered extraterrestrial life.
Yeah, this is one of my questions.
Not in this movie.
No,
that is absolutely not in this movie. That it is nobody ever mentions whether they know about extraterrestrial life or not. They just have found a spacecraft and they treat it as if it is pretty close to a basic rudimentary event. They're more annoyed by a delay getting home than they are discovering an advanced civilization.
Yeah,
what's going on here?
I mean, no, this is one of my questions, and this comes back to it will take us onto Ash, Ian Holmes' Ash as well, in a bit. Yeah, I hadn't thought about this until I watched it this time, and I was watching it this time, and their response is they see this big horseshoe ship, and not one of them goes, "That's fucking incredible, that is. What we might find an alien spaceship." Like, I'm fully expecting these are blue collar guys. They should be like, "Oh my God," The only time it comes up as something that could be new and exciting is when Parker, Yaphet Kotto, starts saying, "Well, we were involved when this was found as well. We better get our share." So there's an acknowledgement that the face hugger that they find is new and potentially has a profit to be gained from it. But nobody looks at this, and they go inside it, and there's all this sort of like the noise made with the atmosphere, and then there's this massive alien fossilized into a chair that had a chest button and the big sort of thing coming out of it, and they're all very clinical and very sort of like, Oh yeah, no, this debris suggests something burst out of his chest, and he's in this big chair that looks like a massive gun, and da da da. Like, yeah, there's no awe, is there? There's no sort of wonder to this. There is from the viewer's perspective, because there's the way it's shot is beautiful, and I think
Oh yeah.
the sets are phenomenal.
Oh, the design work is beyond compare. I
Yeah,
mean, I think the expansiveness, the openness of that ship. I mean, even there's one line again. The problem of these, how you follow basic information. There's one line that kind of suggests the ship is organic,
yes,
um, which is a brilliant idea, and it looks like it's kind of got these like veiny surface on the outside, it's kind of like looks like bone that's got striations. But again, brilliant idea, brilliant weird design inside. All kind of Giger organic stuff. I mean,
mm,
the engineer, the jockey, whatever you want to call him. Nobody ever calls. By the way, nobody ever calls anything by its names.
no,
Like,
they're
you
all
know,
given later.
the yes, exactly. I mean, this is not the engineer. This is not the space jockey. It's not a face hugger. It's not a chest burster. None of that stuff is in this movie. Um, but I think again, yeah, the ship is brilliantly designed. It's great. They have a sense of like being lost in how different it is.
Yeah,
But again, nobody ever says, I mean, they're more worried about, does this mean we'll get more money?
yeah.
It's very
So
bizarre.
this is where I now have to concede, and I have to make a it's a confession so much, but I have to concede something. I hate Prometheus, all right, for a number of reasons.
You're not alone. I
No,
mean,
no, no. And one of the reasons is that one of the scenes that drives me mad is the first time that the scientists go on to the ship that they find, which is very similar to this scene. Okay. Now, I think they are more clinical in Alien than they are in Prometheus in the way that they approach it. And the alien jumping on John Hurt is an accident. However, and maybe this is more about Ridley Scott, those problems that he's going to introduce in Prometheus, in the sort of the lackluster way that that's approached, the germination of it is here
yeah.
in this scene. The way they sort of the way that they traverse, and they're kind of lackluster in the way that they sort of observe safety procedures in entering this ship.
Hmm.
And I'll
That's
admit
true.
that.
Yes, that's true. I also think that like it's the lack of answers here
Mm,
that works,
mm,
right? Like part of the key problem with the franchise is that what works here is that you don't know anything, right? Like we've talked about like Solaris and how just like when you
mm.
encounter alien life, it's weird. It's not going to come with a textbook, right? It's great if the Vulcans land in your backyard and are like,
Tell you
here's the
everything.
star chart, here's
Yeah.
where we're from. We're going to tell you anything. Welcome to the community. If you encounter aliens in outer space, it's you're going to find a derelict ship. It's not going to come with an instruction manual. It's all going to be in a language you can't decipher. Physiology that doesn't make any sense, technology that doesn't make any sense, and there's like this blue mist around the eggs. None of this makes any sense. You can kind of guess at a few things, but it's not designed to make any sense. And
No.
they have to not follow those procedures in order to get the plot to advance, right? And some
Yes.
of it you can kind of justify by Ash, screwing with things. Even that doesn't make sense ultimately, but at least there's a little bit of a justification there. But I mean, again, really, it's the key concepts, right? Like
Mm.
it's all of the details are not important here. Um, and in fact, the more you push on them, getting the like Weapon X origin story kind of defeats
Huh.
the point, right?
I agree. I think this is it, isn't it? The more you try to answer the questions, like where did the xenomorphs come from? Like, no, it doesn't matter. Giving them an origin and it seems to be we've reached a point in pop culture where we now want to know every origin for every character. I mean, it's always been a Star Wars thing, hasn't it? I mean, that's always been, you know, this, I don't know, Gungan, third Gungan from the left in the Phantom Menace has now has a novel about them. But that's fine, do that. But with the alien, with the xenomorphs, like not knowing where they come from or the fact that they're able to adapt and everything else sort of was part and parcel of it. Like you're not supposed to understand everything about them.
Yeah, that ambiguity is part of the point, right?
Yes.
I mean, when we encounter alien life, like it's a giant, like obviously you could figure out why his skeleton is burst from the inside, but I mean,
Mm.
it seems like he's piloting, but where is everybody else? I mean, that doesn't really make sense, but who cares, right? Because it's ambiguous. I
Yeah.
mean, is he dropping a payload of alien egg weapons, or who knows, right? I mean, you could speculate, but again, I'm cool with all of that.
Mm.
But unfortunately, the more you poke at it, like it doesn't have an answer.
No.
Um, I do wish that there was more of an answer for those protocols. There was more of an answer for like, the ship stuff, the human stuff. Like we should be able to nail down like whether this is the first encounter with extraterrestrial life or
Yeah.
not.
So
I mean, things like
okay.
that should not be ambiguous too.
So this gets me to the big question I have in this film, having watched it. I feel, especially this time I'm watching it. Because you're right, they come back. It goes onto the face hugger jumps onto Kane's face, melts through his helmet. I love that. I mean, I love all the design stuff. I think that's all great.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got to say again, I'm not sure if it's Stan Winston stuff, but the face hugger design and the way it looks, that when they prod it and its tail sort of tightens around his throat and things like that, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Like these things were nightmarish. Um, but let's talk about Ash. So they come back to the ship. Sigourney Weaver's Ripley says, "No, you've got to stay in quarantine for however many hours. We don't, we can't let this get back onto the ship to the rest of us." Da da. And Ash, who's the medical professional for the ship, the medic for the ship, overrides her, gets Kane on the ship so that he can treat him. And it feels initially like you've got that push and pull of a bureaucrat versus a medic who's trying to
Mm-hmm.
save a life, right? That's how they're trying to
Mm-hmm.
present it to you. And that's how Ash
In a
presents
very
it.
human way.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
that's how Ash sort of presents it later on. He sort of says, "Well, what would you have me do?" Like, he needed treatment. Because she confronts him and says, "You overrode me." When
And in
we get
fact, he says, I didn't think about that, about her final point, right? So he's playing that he
is
hasn't
human.
thought everything through, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
He had an instinctive sort of reaction as a doctor. He has to treat this person. That's how it's sort of presented. And I like it. I do like all this stuff. When we find that Ash is in fact an android and that he has had instructions from the corporation, again, as you said, like Wayland Yutani doesn't come along until much later on.
Yeah.
The corporation gives him instructions, and we have this instruction that the entity needs to be brought back at all costs and the crew are expendable. The question I have, again, like you, there's no sort of like, holy shit, you found alien life. That's amazing. Like, bring it back for tests. Again, it's very clinical, very sort of thing of like, duds, 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 duds comes up on the screen. This whole thing of like, bring it back, crew are expendable. Has the corporation come across other alien life
Mm-hmm.
whilst out in the galaxy mining? And is this like another they haven't found, let's say, advanced or intelligent alien life, but let's say they found alien creatures on other planets. Is this like another example of that? We don't know.
It's all speculation, right? Because if they haven't found, I mean, well, I guess there's two questions, right? Does the corporation know about alien life? Well, it has to, because it tells them it's ordered them to stop and return a specimen, right? So how did it know this, right? I mean, okay, we might get answers to this eventually. but we're like 8 movies in and nobody really cares. Um, but how do they know that? But then there's also have they had intelligent life or not? What does the crew know? Because it's
Mm.
possible Wayland Yutani knows about the existence of extraterrestrial life, but the crew doesn't. But again, we don't know this. But interestingly, the same thing is true about the android. So they react to that discovery like, oh, he's an android. The corporation, ambushed us, right? So they're justifiably pissed off about that. But how common are androids? Is there an android on every ship?
Well,
I mean, are there tales of other miners or haulers who, it's like they don't say like the corporation did this again, right? It's
well,
like,
or that they do. Well, this is where my question really comes about, because Ash becomes a representative of the corporation, right? So he
mhm,
was planted there. There's a conversation between Ripley and Dallas at one point where, after um, Ash has undermined Ripley and she's a bit pissed off with him, she's like, I don't trust him anymore. She confronts Dallas and says, "How often have you ever sailed out with Ash before?"
mm,
And Dallas actually says, like, there's a brief exchange. They sort of suggest that they've been out on a number of these things, and they know everybody else in the crew from at least one or two other, shipping outs whenever they've done things, but they don't know Ash. And Dallas says, my usual medic, or the usual medic who I've been out with on a number of occasions, was replaced a day before we shipped out by the corporation, and Ash joined the crew.
mhm.
So again, I'm like, okay, well, did they do it knowing that this ship was on the route that they were going to take? Had they
Yeah,
already sort of so the corporation knew that this ship on this planet existed and they were going to be woken up
yeah,
and
I
we're going
think
to have to.
so. I think that's the implication, right, of those orders.
That's
Um,
what I take it. But I was like, that it's taken me till this viewing to really go, is that how that works?
yeah, so I sort of that's the way I always interpreted it. But what I've always wondered is, so why did you go? I mean, I always thought it was, so why did you go do all the mining and then return? Like why bother doing the mining part? Um, now as you're pointing out, like, so why are you hauling all this ore?
Yeah,
you know, you know what I'm saying? Why not have them pass by there on the way out, if nothing else, and send 2 ships and be like, oh, we accidentally sent 2 ships. You guys passed by the alien spacecraft. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Why are you hauling all this ore?
well, why keep it a secret? Well, this is that thing of there's needless complication to this
Yeah.
when it's sort of, they're a corporation. We don't know. At this point, we don't know. They could just be a mining core. I mean, this could be the equivalent of Red Dwarf's Jupiter mining core, and all they've got
Hmm.
is mining equipment. And they just
Right.
happen, because this is in their mining territory, they have picked up the signal, and they don't want to. So, we are going to learn later that Wayland Yutani is a much, much bigger company, and the corporation is almost global in its dominance. Um, but you could assume in this film, well, they're trying to keep it a secret, so they don't want to make a fuss of it. But you have to start filling in like headcanon to make these assumptions.
Hmm.
And again, you've said about the ambiguity, but even, yeah, so because when the Ash turns, um and Dallas has been killed by the alien, and so Ripley is now in charge, and she goes to Mother, and she sees these instructions, and Ash sneaks in, and he's like, "There's a perfectly good explanation for this." I think his calmness is really creepy, and I think Ian Holm is great
Hmm.
in this film. By the way, I think Ian Holm is, you know, I think overall the cast are great, but I think Ian Holm as Ash is wonderfully creepy. But the fact he turns on it and then tries to suffocate it when he's trying to suffocate her with that
Hmm.
rolled up magazine.
It is a little strange.
Yeah. But he's obviously going, she's hit him, so he's going a bit batty, and then he sort of, Parker takes his head off and all this other stuff. They bring him back online, and he sort of says, basically, he doesn't. This is where it should be like a full. The exposition should be like, oh, we always knew this thing was here. I
Right.
was sent as to ensure its retrieval. If you don't make it, then some other bugger's going to do it, kind of thing. But he doesn't. He just sort of says, he just kind of repeats the instruction that was given to him, and then says, "You have my sympathies," sort of, suggesting that they're not going to make it. I don't know. It just feels you've talked about ambiguity, but you're right. This thing of the plot, the conspiracy with the corporation is never made fully clear.
Right. Yeah, and I don't know. You're right about Weyland-Yutani implicitly being a mining corporation.
Yeah.
There's nothing beyond that. I'm not really sure why they don't classify the orders. They classify like all of Ash's stuff,
Yeah.
but Ripley's totally able to actually get the information she needs. I don't know how that works, but of course you need it for the plot. I think Ash using the magazine, it sort of symbolically ties him to the face hugger.
Yeah.
Symbolically ties him to the aliens. So, it's weird, but whatever. I agree the performance is good. But right, why not set clearly this is a future with an evil corporation that pays people, underpays people, has mercenary contracts. They mention if you don't do this, they can just cancel your share.
Mm.
I don't really know what a share is. A share of what?
I suppose it was sale of the ore. You're bringing the ore back, so they're going to sell it, and then I don't know.
Right, except what is it? A share of 1%, right? Because
Yeah.
you didn't do the mining. I mean, you're using all their equipment. I don't know how that works. But the implication is kind of that the corporation is evil and is able to cut people out. Why not send in some Marines who you pay a small amount of money? I mean, people are willing to do mining work for very cheap. I mean, that's part of the reality of the human experience. People are willing to fight aliens for very cheap,
Yeah.
I would imagine.
Well,
right. So there's a lot of this that I sort of feel like the ambiguity works when it comes to, the engineer and the alien, and the encounter with extraterrestrial life, much like Solaris, right? That's good stuff. And it's creepy here and all of that stuff works. But despite my gripes about strobe lights and, all that stuff, the ship. But it's like the world that they live in. We don't have to see Earth. We don't have to, anything. But the basics of how that works. Do they know about extraterrestrial life? How common are androids? What exactly is the mission in this betrayal here? I mean, how does the ship work? Why does it look like this? All of that stuff can't be ambiguous too. You kind of have to put your thumb on the alien stuff and let that be ambiguous, and let the rest be well defined.
100%. I completely agree with you, because I think one of the things, this is that thing of sometimes with horror fiction or weird fiction, it's like, in order for that uncanniness or that weirdness to really sort of work, you have to have a stable platform to then destable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you sort of you need to be you have to move it 1 degree away from normality, but you need to be close enough to normality and have that standard for that to feel pulled out from under you. If you don't have that, if you don't understand the rest, that doesn't work.
If the guys investigating what turns out to be a demonic possession turn out to be ancient aliens and mystics themselves halfway through, you have a problem.
Yes.
Right? You cannot relate to this plot and to the weirdness of what they've encountered.
Exactly.
It's just a weird Marvel universe at that point.
Yes. One thing I would say is the thing about you just popped in my head, and we will address it on the next episode when we talk about aliens. But this thing about how long has the human race known about aliens or been involved continues the question, because In the second film, when you have the Marines going to revisit LV-426, whatever it is that the planet's called, they actually say it's another bug hunt. Don't worry about it. It's just another bug hunt. And you go, okay, how many bug hunts have you been on, and what do you mean by a bug? Like, you're not. Is that a Starship Troopers joke?
I was going to say, yeah,
Yeah,
this is set in the same universe as Starship Troopers, apparently.
yeah. So is that so that I've always wondered about that film from Aliens is where I'm like, oh, okay, well the Marines seem to have experience with other times they've been sent out to something. So have they come across other aliens? I don't know. So there is that ambiguity. There's definitely that question that I think will persist um, in this franchise, or maybe Romulus is going to answer all these questions in a really concise and informed way. We shall see. Anyway, so yeah, I do think there's a problem with this relationship with these orders and why Ash has been replaced before the mission. And you're right though; it does imply that they knew this ship was there and this signal was being broadcast.
Yeah, and I know it's silly, but I can't get over like why are you sending the ship already loaded with ore past the mission to get this deadly? I mean, none of these things really make sense. And and you're entirely right, right? I mean, you've got to control the ambiguity, right? You have the aliens be ambiguous. I mean, like it doesn't matter. Like, what's that blue mist? Is that a trigger system for the eggs? Maybe. Seems like it. But we don't have to know because that's a weird alien technology. The point is it's weird and mysterious.
Mm.
The point isn't that we don't know who these characters are or what they're doing or why what the corporation is or why it made these decisions. At that point, we're just watching some kind of weird student film with no reference point.
Yeah, yeah. So I do think there's definite sort of confusion and muddled going on that point. So let's talk about the next point. Let's talk about. So I want to talk about the horror. We talk about it being a sci-fi horror, and I do want to talk about because I do think the effects in this are important and how they are utilized, and also, like you said, how the alien is utilized to convey the horror. So the first time anything of we have the face hugger attacking Kane and
Mm-hmm.
it being presented. So you have Kane on the hospital bed with it around his neck and all that sort of stuff. Not so much horror, but I think it's really well done. I like the design. I
Oh,
think
I
it
think
looks
that's
good.
horror. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, but like,
it's not splatter horror, but
yeah,
it's like, yeah, no, we don't see aliens like this in Star Trek. Like this is creepy and weird.
yeah. Ferengi
Um,
just gripping people by the head and sort of, yeah, that's how they
yeah.
impregnate. Um, yeah, no, I think because he's got like like knuckles and the egg sacs and
Mm.
um, yeah. And I like that when it comes off, they get to examine it, so you see the underneath and you see all these other bits and pieces. It's a brilliantly like good design.
And Ash is the one who's, says they keep saying, "Why don't we freeze him?" Right?
Yeah,
Which makes so much sense, right? I mean, throughout all of this, right? But of course, the explanation from a plot standpoint is Ash is the medical officer and he's sabotaging.
yes, but and the point I like the point. He says, well, we don't know what it's going to do to if we try to. We don't really know what it's going to do to Kane. Um, so I understand he's sort of like I'm a little bit out my depth. Like I don't know what the best thing to do is, and then it falls off of his own accord. Um, and you get a good scare. It drops down onto Ripley, um, and they play that quite well. But really, the scene that is, I suppose, sort of the most iconic scene of this film is the chest buster. Like Kane comes off. He says he's hungry. They have dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all sat around, and again, there's sort of, there's banter. They're making fun of each other and what they're going to do when they get home and have real food. Da, da. And then John Hurt starts to sort of choke and sputter, and we get the chest buster scene. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, look, the dinner scene is pretty great, right? I mean, and you're right, John Hurt's is fantastic. Um, but it's sort of played for shock, and it's part of the stuff that works is it is shocking, it is, he dies very quickly, it's shocking, it's bloody, it's very effective, it's part of this continuation of this encounter with the strange and this alien life cycle that we is ambiguous and we don't understand. All that stuff works. Watching it this time, I'm like, yeah, you have scanned him before. Why would you not scan him when this thing is gone, right? You'd find, oh, there's a giant thing living in his chest, right? I know, I'm Julian. I know I'm being Julian, but like that chest thing living in his chest is really big.
Yeah.
Where is it? What kind of how does he not have pressure on his heart or his lung? Like it's pretty big in there. It's I know that's like not the point, but and of course it looks a little silly, running away and poking its head out. That's one of the rare sort of like close-ups where they can't hide how. No, but I'm okay with it. I wish they had frankly let it be a little more silly throughout and not had as much black and strobing lights and everything. So yeah, I mean I'm sort of more bothered by the logical problems now than I would have been at 12 or whatever.
No, I agree. I mean, it's funny that the idea of the chest burster for someone who routinely gets heartburn and indigestion, the thought of having something living in my chest cavity just fills me with fear. Like the pain that would cause. And like I say, he must be like suffering, like, it must be pressing on his lungs or something, or how is he getting, or he's not short of breath. But you're right. It's a great. I really like the scene. Like, he starts to splutter, and then all of a sudden, like they all rush to him, and there's a part of me that wonders because of what learn later, who's to say that Ash didn't scan him and just let it continue. You don't know that he doesn't already know. Because he's the one that tells them not to do anything to it. Like because it bursts out. I actually like the close up where it sort of like it goes and it sort of looks around.
It looks so like early Jim Henson though. Like,
it does.
Yeah.
What's worse though, when you say about early Jim Henson, is when it runs across the table.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a scene that if if I was going to George Lucas that's where I'd be like, no, we cut that. That doesn't look good. That looks.
Or we're going to replace that with a CGI Jabba.
Yes, we're going to do something to make that move differently.
Oh,
that looks like it's been like someone's pulled it back and let it go, and it's wheeling its way across a table. Like it looks bad. But I like again. This is the thing with this cast. I like all their reactions. Now there's this legend that certain people weren't told how this was going to go and all this other stuff. Apparently, that there's still debate over to whether or not that's true. That like Veronica Cartwright's reaction and I think some of it Yaphet Kotto and Harry Dean Stanton weren't told like, what was going to happen, all this other stuff. So whether that's true or not, still up for debate. But I like their reaction. But again, we say when you watch this back and that Ash is involved, Parker goes for it with like a knife or something, like he's going to do something, and Ash is like, no, don't touch it, like leave it be. Right. And so this is where I'm, before the reveal, having go back and watching it, when you start to look at the evidence, there's more and more where you're going like, he's manipulating and cultivating the situation for it to survive. But it's still an effective scene. I think it's still a good scene.
Yeah, I think overall, I mean, I would think somebody else would have demanded the scan, right? And if Ash has represented, I've done the scan and, he's fine.
Well, Ripley should have, because she's the one that was all about the quarantine. Like, there should have been that scene where she's like, well, he's fine. I'm glad he's okay. That's wonderful. Does he pass quarantine criteria? Like, should we not be keeping him in locked away or something?
But, and again, this could be solved with a line of dialogue where Ash
Yeah.
says, right, I've scanned him and there's no sign of any infection, or any remnant or whatever. So what was that thing on his face doing? Right? I mean, it's breathing for him. I mean, somebody should be asking some of these questions. And you could kind of clear this up with some dialogue, but again, I think almost the way that the dialogue is done in that naturalistic way in which they're stepping on each other kind of prohibits you from asking some of these questions because you have had so much basic information that it's hard to ascertain, that you kind of either have to go with it or not. And I think that's kind of a trick, that it hasn't really earned some of that scene there, which it could have. It's not difficult to make those changes, but yeah, these problems kind of become more apparent as I watch it again. Now the thing with the knife, it made me wonder, like, it's not as bad as like the Joker's master plan in Dark Knight or something, where you're like, it had to exactly happen this way, and you predicted everybody's reactions, or the Knives Out movies are like that. But here I wonder, obviously Ash couldn't keep somebody from instinctively stabbing it. What would have happened? Yeah. I mean, I would hope somebody would instinctively stab.
Well, we knew that the face hugger had acid for blood.
Right.
So you could sort of say, well, don't, because we don't know that this doesn't have acid for blood, and it could do some real damage. So yeah,
that's true. I mean, right.
So we do go from that situation, and they sort of jettison Kane's body off into space, which again kind of feels a little weird when it should be like, okay, should we not keep that for testing and or does he not want to be buried at home? Surely we can keep him about.
Also, there's tons of space on this ship. Like he's got tons of rooms, like hanging from one of the meat hooks in the 30 rooms with meat hooks. Like, I did think it's a little strange. Yeah. And why are you giving him like a Spock burial, in space? Like, is that what you do in this culture?
That's it. We're looking for the Genesis planet to bring him back. So you do get this is sort of a shift, really, isn't it? This is the sort of into this sort of. They now move into the hunt where they start looking for it. They think it's the size of a cat. They've got the motion sensor, which will come back in the next film, and a flamethrower.
Silly. Right. I mean, if you're gonna do the Red Dwarf parody, that motion sensor device is high on the list. Like, it's very close to a parody already.
Yes,
it's a giant box with a tube on it.
Yeah, they have a better one in the next film. They do sort of like they up the ante on that one at least.
Mm-hmm.
So they do, but they have this thing with the hunt. They start looking around for it, and they find the skin. Brett finds the skin.
First, they find the cat, and then they say, well, the cat can just trigger the motion sensor again, right? So the cat gives you a jump scare, right? Okay, fine.
Yeah.
So they tell Brett. Now, keep in mind, we're hunting an alien. We have just cornered it. Oh shit, that was a cat. Well, why did you let the cat go? It could trigger Brett. Why don't you go off on your own and search for the cat? What could go wrong?
Yeah, it's a cliche, isn't it? That I'll be right back. So he does. He goes off looking for Josie. Finds the skin. He finds the sort of like the shed skin, which it appears to have gone from what, a foot long to 9 feet long, or 9 feet tall in one shedding.
Yeah. What is it eating? What is its food source for gaining all this mass?
Water.
I mean, again,
lots of water.
Not to be Julian, but I mean, it found the hidden grain room.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, we don't. Yeah, that'd be a good point, wouldn't it? Like, it's got into the stores or something like that. Like, it's eaten. it's eating our meat or whatever, like, Um, but it does, it grows, and then it sort of kills Brett. Um,
Well, it
this,
pulls him away. This is very weird, right? Like, so
yeah,
so the next two, it kills the face hugger. I mean, the chest burster obviously kills
hmm
one, and then the next two kills, it pulls the bodies.
yeah.
It takes the bodies. What is it doing with the bodies? Even in alien lore, it's not clear what is it doing with these bodies, right? I mean, like, it doesn't need a food source. It's already magically at 9 feet tall. So why does it behave differently with these first couple bodies?
Don't know. I mean, maybe it is sustenance. Maybe it's like a lion or something. It's going to keep it. I'm full now, but I might need food later. So I'm going to stash these in a tree somewhere so no one can get them. That kind of thing. I don't know. Because later on, as you say, when we get into alien lore in the later films, we find out that these are worker aliens, and actually they don't usually kill people. They often take them to become hosts for more. Um. So yeah, I don't know. I'm going to suggest food at some point in the future. Um, so that's the first two because it does the same to Lambert, isn't it? Is the other one because Kane? No,
Who's
Kane is killed
who's
with a
in
thingy.
the
Then
the
Brett,
ventilation? Yeah,
yeah,
that stuff's
Dallas,
okay, right? With I mean the
Brett,
little
it sort of shoots
shutting off
out.
the shafts. Yeah,
Yeah, I like that. That's a good scene. Um, and that's been
and at least they're
parodied
doing
by
something. Like, it's not clear what the layout of the ship is, but at least they're not being stupid. At least they're not wandering off, going, "I'll go retrieve that cat."
yeah.
Make sure we all stay together, but sure. I mean, at least they're not being stupid, right? So, I mean, I like, at least there's a. I don't know why the ventilation shaft only has three openings. I mean, I don't understand the layout of the ship. I don't understand what the ship is doing, but at least there's a semblance of they're trying to be intelligent. Like, by the way, if you're hauling around a giant box with a tube on it to detect the alien, you might want to put on some protective gear, right?
Yeah,
Like, I mean, you might want to at least match the PPE we use for COVID when you're fighting the alien with, acid blood.
with a flamethrower
Yeah,
in
yeah.
in
I
close quarters. That can't be good. But um,
nothing on a mining ship is explosive, by the way.
yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Um, so the deaths start to rack up. Um, they lose people, and you basically you end up with um, Lambert, who is it? Lambert, Parker, and Ripley. After
Mm.
Ash has sort of revealed himself to be the droid and everything that's gone on, they beat him, and he's. I like this again. I like the droid design. I like it when they smash his head off. It's not like they haven't done it like a normal robot. Like he's not
Mm.
all metallic-y. They've gone for these sort of milky substance and orbs, and it's almost like a biomechanic kind of approach.
It's
Um,
very Blade Runner.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
before Blade Runner.
pre-Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's been the suggestion, hasn't there, that that
Yeah.
they're in the same
It's the same
universe, and
world. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and now the, like, kind of milky white thing is kind of a cliche, but I mean, this is sort of establishing it, right?
yes,
No,
yeah.
I do like that stuff.
And again, there's some good effects. They bring him back up. It's just his head, and it's obviously Ian
Mhm.
Holm sitting under a table, but it all
Right.
looks good, and I like that
Good
they.
enough.
Yeah, yeah, it's good. It looks good. I like it. I think it works well. It's
And the kind
effective.
of milk stuff is like congealing on him, like
Yeah,
that. I like much more than sort of him under the table. I'm like, I like the attention to, like, it's not milk. It's some sort of like milk, instant milk
blood.
kind of powder or something that has, but it looks cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks good. It's a good effect. I think it's a good design, and it makes him separate from them.
Hmm.
This idea of the droid. Um, and again, you said this is 2 years after um, Star Wars, and the droids we've seen mech and they've been very like C-3PO, R2-D2. We've seen those kinds of droids. To have this human-looking sort of bioorganic droid, I like as a
Yeah.
sort of as a progression.
very different. Again, kudos
Yeah,
to this film for its time, right?
yeah. But we do then get this sort of finale where Ripley's going up to set off the self-destruct,
Uh,
um, and they're going to get in the shuttle, um, and hope to be picked up. But while she's up there, um, Lambert and Parker are both killed by the alien.
who
Um,
doesn't move their bodies this time?
yes, who they get left, and she finds the bodies, doesn't she, this time? But like, again, one of the things I want to say is that we've talked about the alien being kept in the dark a lot of the time. You've seen close-ups, and again, you've said kudos. I think kudos to the alien design. It's about Geiger's or Giger's kind of designs are great, but there's like little things in the alien design as well. I love the protruding second mouth, the fact that it's constantly salivating, um,
Yeah.
the um that it has got all the ridges and the designs and stuff on it is very cool. It's a fantastic. I mean, it's so unique as a design. Um, it's a really well developed, and to turn this from if you've seen, I mean, you've seen it, I'm sure. Like the original Geiger design, the original Giga design. You sort of look at it and you go, "Oh right, yeah, that's really like out there."
Mm-hmm.
For them to
No,
have
I
gone,
mean his stuff looks like unadaptable, right? You look at
yes,
his stuff and you're like, how are we gonna do that? Especially in something that moves. Um, yeah, no, I agree. And no, it looks great. I mean, and I think that this this movie is constantly balanced between that design work and the creepiness of it and the fact that they can't show it,
yeah,
right? So it's like we've got all this great stuff, all this great design work. We've spent tons of money to try to get, you know, both a costume a guy can be in and also, animatronic kind of mouth. You know, none of it looks great from a material standpoint. The design works great. We can't really show it without it looking crap.
yeah.
So how do we, like this is, I think, one of the key tensions of this movie. And I think like covering it in slime is such an effective tactic. Like there are so many times where I'm like, you know, what irritates me about this movie are these, characters moving around a space. I don't really know what space they're in. And then you cut to like an extreme close up of like part of the alien. And it's like, we never see the alien. Why did you cut to that shot? I have to guess that it's in the same room. I mean, like,
Mm,
this really annoys me. But they have to do that because of this central tension. But what really works is, like you're saying, it's always salivating. Like, spray mucus like slime on any
yes.
surface, and it instantly looks creepier and alive, and they work that to,
Oh,
sheer
but
money.
yeah, to perfection. I mean, they make it look, they overcome the issues that they have, brilliantly. I think it works exceptionally well. Um, and so yeah, I think this whole alien design works really well. I think it works to me. I do think it's creepy, and when they do show it for split seconds, I think it works. But it's a little bit like I find this happened obviously with Predator as well, a similar thing when the original Alien design that they had for that, and they brought it on set, and they were like, "Yeah, it kind of worked as an idea, but now we've put it into practicality. Like it's crap. It doesn't look good. But even invisible, like it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to scrap it, and um, they left Stan Winston to his devices to go. They're like, look, go create something, and he created this like the iconic Predator sort of design that we know today. Um, but it came out of that sort of tension, that sort of stress of being limited on budget, time, and what they can do on screen. And you can sort of see how if they'd have said, to hell with it, we're going to just show this in pure screen light and stuff. This franchise
They
would not have
tried.
been.
No, they
Yeah.
tried. I mean, there's footage of a guy in an alien outfit,
Oh
going
yeah, but
around
they
the
did.
Nostromo, right? But
But
they
they
were like,
didn't.
no, that looks like crap,
Yeah,
right? You,
exactly.
you can't use it.
And if they'd used that in the film, if they'd have made that decision and gone with it and gone, it's
Right.
good enough, then this film would not have a franchise. It would have
No, this would be a B movie that just,
exactly. Yeah.
I agree with that. But so my objection is, like, let's say, you have those two characters who die near the end. Um, they sort of look to the side and you get like a extreme close up of like part of the alien.
Yeah.
It's not even clear that it's in the same room. I don't know like what the background is. And just having, I think much more effective is on the escape pod where, you sort of see a more distant shot, a sort of, medium to distant shot with the alien embedded in the wall and the surface of a console kind of thing, and you're aware that it's in the same room. I mean, I know it's hard to do, but if you can have like the tail or sort of, part of it clearly in
In
the
shot.
room with them,
Yeah.
it doesn't, yeah, in shot is great. If, it's the tail's hanging down or something, right? That's great. But even if you can cut to another shot of it in the room with them, or just part, it's in the darkness, but it's clearly the same room. Because,
Yeah.
just showing them in a red room, the poorly lit red room, and then an extreme close up of like part of the alien's face with slime on it. And I guess the background's kind of red, like, and then you cut to them screaming and you cut to they're already dead, right? Cut to back to Ripley. That does not fucking cut it. Like,
No.
fucking unacceptable bullshit. And I know you're saying like it works. They worked around their limitations. Yes and no. I mean, yes, they created creative solutions, but I guarantee that Ridley Scott looks at this movie and sees all the ways that he successfully solved those problems and all the ways that he did not, and he probably looks at a shot like that and says, yeah, I see why that is so weak. I can't believe people accept that.
Yeah.
I know why it's not stronger.
No,
Does
no,
that make sense?
no, I do. I understand what you're saying. Exactly. Yeah, and I appreciate exactly what you mean. I mean, um, I think, what's his name? The Harry Dean Stanton character is a really good example of this, actually. Brett's character, when his death comes, there are several shots, like it goes from him to, and because he's been stood under like water's been dripping on him, and he's cleaned his face and all this other stuff. And you've seen there's been all this saliva and this, it's salivated. So there's a part of you going like, oh my shit, has he washed his face with alien saliva? That's disgusting. But it's just dripping, and at no point is he also saying there's water dripping quite extensively on this ship. That probably is dangerous. But his death comes, and it's that thing, isn't it? It does flick between him and this alien, but then you see the sort of the tail going between his legs. But then the next shot you see is an alien coming down from, or is him, the alien is lifting him up into the ceiling, into the rafters. And there is this moment you're like, hang on, well, where did it come from? Why is it doing that? How is it moving up? Like, it all feels very quick and confusing. And so I agree with what you're saying, that there are moments when you're like, this kind of needs a wide shot just to sort of establish who's in danger and how much in danger they are. So I agree with that.
I agree with you. I think that I do want to real quick point out the tail scene in Alien Covenant, where in the shower, which is as close as they've come to kind of like tentacle rape, right?
Yes.
That I did not realize, like, that has a precedent in this film with that tail kind of coming in that exact scene.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good point. Actually, yeah, a little less rapey in this film. So
maybe that's why the alien took those first two bodies.
Just gonna hump them.
It got all the grain. It doesn't absorb biomass. We don't know, right?
It's just gonna do its thing in a corner.
I'm not saying it's having sex with those bodies, but it's ambiguous.
Yes. Yeah, it's doing something in a corner somewhere. But that does sort of take us to the finale. The ship, Ripley tries to stop the self-destruction. Too late. It's too far gone to stop. These things happen. And so she has to escape she pushed out to the shuttle.
Can we just real quick just say what bullshit that countdown is?
Yeah.
Like, so first of all, why does every ship have a self-destruct thing? Like, I get that on a military ship, kind of, but like, we don't build tanks and battleships with self-destruct sequences, And
Or
for some reason,
tugboats,
it
or
feels
tugboats for that matter.
that's true. Yeah, good point. I mean, for some reason, I guess because it's a hauling mining ship, I feel like why does it have a self destruct to begin with? And then you can only cancel it for the first 5 minutes out of the 10 countdown. And then she goes in and she tries to cancel it, but like it's ineffective. And she's like, "You bitch," about mother.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure why it was ineffective.
I don't know that
This
bit.
is
That bit kind of confuses me a little bit when it's sort of because Mother's been as a computer has been almost on Ash's side. Like she's, it's not an
Mhm.
AI, it's not an intelligence, it's just voicing commands and stuff. But I don't know. It's sort of it's unclear on that front.
right.
Um,
I mean, obviously Ash hasn't programmed it not to self-destruct because the
no,
point is to bring which you think they would do. But yeah, the whole countdown thing. I like that she's blocked and has to go back and try to stop the countdown.
yeah,
But I don't know why she can't stop it or why it's limited to 5 out of 10 minutes. There's just a bunch of bullshit at this
yeah.
particular
Well,
moment.
it feels chaotic. I mean, I do like the fact that they made it quite chaotic. I think the music's
Mhm.
good. I think the sort of like, it feels like there's a lot of noise and there's stuff going on. So I like the fact that it feels chaotic and, hard to get your thoughts. Um, so this then
And
goes
she's got to
into,
go back to the escape pod and
yeah,
has
and
to
she's
do
got
it.
to get into the space. And then, yeah, she's about to she thinks she's sort of safe, but then the alien, you see the hand come out and you find out that it's in the shuttle. And so she backs into a
Okay.
corner in to get the spacesuit on.
This leads to another issue that I have, and it might be minor. How does the alien move around the ship? Like they have all of these doors, and they're frequently opening the doors and going, and it's sort of implied that it's using the ventilation shaft. We know it is to some degree, but it's using ventilation ducts to move into rooms that are locked. How did it get into the escape pod?
Don't know. I can't
I'm
answer
just
that
saying it's a
question.
cool reveal,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
I don't know. I
It's
can't
the we
answer that
defeated
question.
the demon, but is it really defeated? Okay,
Yeah,
I get it.
can't.
It's cool, but
No, I concede. I cannot answer that question. It just did. Yeah. Um, but it is a good reveal. It's in the shuttle. I like that bit.
mhm.
Um,
And she's scared. She puts
yeah,
on a spacesuit, like she's moving slowly. Finally, somebody's acting smart.
yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, well, Ripley's the only one that's kind of acted smart throughout the whole film. But she's like, we should do this. We should freeze him. We should not let him in the first place. She's been kind of like the voice of reason throughout. There's a reason that she ends up surviving. Um, this bit though, and I'll put this to you. So this bit with her getting into the sort of the spacesuit, but doing it by getting into her underwear first, and
Her
then running
underwear
around.
is a bit much. It's
Yeah,
barely on her, by the way.
yes,
So,
and that's always
like,
yeah. It always feels a little bit like this isn't one of those weird things where I've always wondered like, is it supposed to be titillation? Was this kind of like, oh, we've got a very sort of like svelte beautiful woman running around the thing, and we have an opportunity to have her in some underwear running around. But there's also part of me, the way that her sort of like her panties are sort of like resting on her hips. I'm like, that looks really uncomfortable. Like, just pull them up, sort yourself out. Like, that looks really uncomfortable.
yeah, you would think you'd notice that at some point and pull
Yeah.
it. And yeah, it's strange. And it is kind of like the Michael Bay moment, but
Yes.
not shot like Michael Bay. Like it's not shot in this titillating way, but it's obviously like kind of done for that effect. Like she doesn't really need to,
No,
you
there's a
know.
couple of shots up. There's a couple of like up shots where I'm like, this feels like titillation. Do you know what I mean? Where
Yeah,
they're going for a certain look or a certain.
I think it wants to be, but Ridley Scott
Yeah.
just doesn't have that fleshy. Maybe
Yeah.
he's embarrassed by it. He doesn't have that sort of
Well, he's
like,
British, so he was a bit
yeah.
sort of like, well, we'll have some TNA, oh my God, this is what it is.
There's a
Yeah,
woman. in her panties in this room
Yeah.
right now. Whereas an American is like,
What-
put the camera under her and slowly
Yeah.
stand up.
Yeah.
God.
I don't know. It feels confused, and also you say it kind of feels needless.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always, even as a kid, watching this, I've always felt a little bit confused by this. When it's like, this just feels, I don't know, like yeah,
Weird.
odd, yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, besides for that point, like yeah, she sort of deals with it. She gets into the spacesuit and jettisons the alien out into space. Um, and shuts the thing, and that's kind of the end. I mean, that's it. Then we get this sort of monologue, her monologuing at the end about the crew, the Nostromo,
Mm-hmm. She
signing off.
delivers her message to
Yeah,
Earth, right?
yeah,
Uh,
and she's kind of hoping that she'll be picked up. She's because we also get the destruction of the rest of the ship.
Boy,
Um,
is that bad.
yes, I have to say that
Boy, is
looked.
that bad.
Yeah, that's not a good exploding effect. I even look watching it this time. I was like, that looks animated in the sort of like 80s cartoon kind of animated style. Like it looks really kind of rushed.
And it explodes. It has that weird horizontal
Yeah.
explosion instead of out in all directions, and it explodes like 3 times for effect. I mean, I kept thinking of God, what is the ecological one that I liked more than you did in the first half?
Silent running.
So in Silent Running, which you covered for season 5, the explosion at the end of that is better than this.
Yes. Yeah.
And
No, I
Silent
agree.
Running, like I know the layout of the ship. I
Yeah.
I know, I was surprised by how many, things in this compared. Although obviously this is way more influential and
Mm.
the alien design and stuff. Nobody can beat it, right? But yeah, the explosion made me think.
Yeah.
If you're longing for the explosion at the end of Silent Running, you've done a piss poor job.
Yes. No, and it's kind of like secondary. They almost know that it's secondary, where they're like, "Oh yeah, oh shit, that's going to explode." All right, well, just have that done, and then we'll move on. Um, to the alien being blasted out of the airlock. So yeah, but that alien we know is adaptive. They explain that it's adaptive, so it's probably still just cartwheeling through space. Is it dead? We don't know. And then we get the monologue, and she goes into stasis, and we get the end credits. And she's just hoping to be picked up, and will then lead into aliens. Um,
Kind of.
yeah,
Like you say, all the movies sort of have a very different feel.
yes. Um, but let's round up then. So, your final thoughts or any other final points then to make on Alien?
I mean, I think this is a fine movie. I think it's not as good as people remember. I think those plot holes and like I don't know anything about this crew. I don't know anything about the ship. I don't know why it's filled with books and water, and that's become one of my pet peeves on spaceships is you know weird rooms without explanation where space is a luxury and water everywhere where water is a luxury. Um, that's kind of become a pet peeve.
I mean, it's
The close-up shots.
not only is water a luxury, but in a computer-based and mechanical ship, it's a problem.
Right. Yeah, this is not cooling the
Yeah.
machines, Um, and for as much as like we have kind of come to complain about like sort of Chris Nolan fighting cuts where,
Mm.
it's sort of like where are they fighting, and you get these quick cuts between moving limbs and suddenly they're in a different environment. This has those quick cuts throughout the entire ship, and I think that really has come to annoy me. Um, I think I put up with a lot of this,
Mm.
earlier on. The lack of explanation. This is not a movie that is concerned about a wider universe. It
No.
doesn't matter what Wayland Yutani is. It doesn't matter, why they want the alien specimen, what they knew, right? This is not designed. It's not built for a sequel. Um,
The
And I think
irony of that, considering that Ridley Scott came out for Prometheus to basically give you all of those answers.
except it doesn't,
No, it
right?
doesn't.
And it has interesting stuff. I will say that I kind of struggle with a sort of fascistic tendency in myself to prefer sort of ultra 4K, beautiful, high definition. You know, I'm such an aesthetic person, and I don't need the
Been
CGI.
spoilt by 4K.
Yeah, and by the more recent Alien movies. I mean,
Mm,
I have to say that like look, the engineering, the ship that they find is the high point for me.
yeah,
That whole sequence is just humans encountering weird alien life. The design work, that's really where every surface has been designed, um, by Giger. It just looks amazing. Um, I love all of that stuff. All that stuff is amazing. Um, the rest is the haunted house on the spaceship. It does its job really well for what it is. It's meant as a kind of, it's not. It's meant as a kind of disposable movie that's
mm.
doing something very different than Star Wars. I think judged on that level, it's incredibly influential. The design works great, but it has these logical problems that just don't hold up. And I will take the more recent movies with their sort of creepy alien, the most, I mean, even in Alien versus Predator Requiem, the hospital scene with like pumping eggs down
Yeah.
I mean, like that's creepy and scary in a way that this isn't quite able to achieve with its, use of light and not, in darkness. So yeah, I would say the dialogue doesn't really work for me. I mean, some of it does, but then there's so much basic elements that I consider important to the plot that either aren't given or are given in passing dialogue where I have to, it's like, wait a minute, how does this countdown to destruction work?
Mm.
Like, I mean, there's so much like that. So I don't know. I think it does not hold up as much as I expected it to.
No, that's fair. I can see that. I mean, you see about the visuals. One of the things I watched this on Amazon, and so it's always going to be in the best quality for the TV. And I watched it on a 4K TV, and it's still grainy. It has some of that sort of aesthetic that's I think expected of sort of 70s films in particular. And it holds. It's a very 70s film. I mean, the films we've talked it related it to Star Wars, Silent Running, Outland is early 80s, but it still has that sort of 70s industrial feel. Um, so I know what you mean. It doesn't have the gloss that I think, but I think that weirdness that comes with better special effect technology, you can do those sort of things later, and I appreciate, I know exactly what you mean about some of those later films. I'm not a fan of Prometheus and Covenant. That's, we're not going to be covering those, but there's something about this film that I do like, and I think again where I enjoyed like Outland, I had sort of problems with that, but I enjoyed that film in this kind of like this idea of blue collar workers being thrust into a sort of an odd situation in space. So we said that was like high noon, but on a mining colony in space, this is, this could be them coming back from. Well, this is further out, but this is a bunch of sort of haulage guys, space truckers, involved with a haunted house or with an alien, with a monster, with a universal monster kind of sort of deal. And I think that's great.
Yeah.
I do like it. I like the fact that like, you know, they're not holy awed about it. They are a little bit like, yeah, it's great, but how much am I going to get paid for doing this? Like Parker's response is like, well, my contract doesn't say anything about going down to any bloody planet and doing this thing. And it takes Ash to be like, actually, yeah, if you read the small print, it does, and you can forfeit your entire share if you don't do it. Um, so I like all those little bits and pieces that there's almost like there's attention been paid to specific to certain details and not others. So I actually know more about their contract arrangement than I do about the actual plot. Um, which is not good, as you sort of say. Like it's kind of faltering in certain areas. Um, I think it's limited by what they could do. In the same way of like they realized they couldn't show too much of the alien costume because it didn't work in certain light, and they have to work their way around it. But I do think they're successful. I still watch this film and really enjoy it. It still feels like this is a film. I think if we'd have done this 5, 6 years ago, I'd have been like 5-star film. This is a 5-star film.
Mm.
This is a masterpiece. Blah blah blah. I still think it works on a level. I think the music is fantastic. I think the design work is incredible, and like I said, the sets are brilliant as well. These are built. This isn't like a green screen world. Like these are all sets. These things exist. So I appreciate all that. But you're right. The plotting and the exposition and that link between, or the division between what is ambiguous with the aliens and what should be grounding us with the humans is a bit mixed up. It gets all mixed up. I don't know enough, and I leave the film with more questions than I think I should have, and that's a bit of a downside to this film. Uh, so yeah, no, it's that knocks a star off. I still think it's a 4-star film for me. I still think I really enjoy this film and I get a lot from it. But you're right. I think as I watch it critically and really sort of like notice these things, it does sort of knock it a little bit. It hasn't aged as well as I thought it had done. Anyway,
Yeah, I like the blue collar stuff you mentioned too. I mean,
mm.
this is so influential, and I think in really good ways.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah,
you know, all of the ways that this is influential, I love. The movie itself, it's okay, but I have those problems. But
yeah. Anyway,
and now we get the action movie follow up.
yes, the James Cameron. I believe it's sort of after um he'd made Terminator, which I actually just recently watched. He gets the opportunity to helm the sequel to Alien with Aliens in 1986. Um, Ripley returns. The crew obviously don't because we're all dead, and we return to the planet to sort of Let's see how we feel about this. I think I'm actually going to watch. I've decided I'm going to watch the full director's cut. Because I haven't watched that in quite a long time. And we'll see how I feel if that adds anything or provides anything of detail or, is it a Snyder cut version where, yes, you've got to watch the director's cut rather than the theatrical cut. We shall see. But I'm wondering, because you and I, Julian, have had a few sort of times where you've kind of suggested that this could be a contentious
Mm.
discussion around aliens. So,
Yeah, my before this watch, my attitude has always been Alien is a good movie. Aliens gets everything.
mm,
Um, and that's always been the way that I felt growing up. I mean, we'll go into that more next time, but yeah, we'll see. I mean, with me sort of feeling like, well, Alien is kind of it's doing its job, but I think all the things that I like about Alien are not present in Aliens. I will say that. So we'll see.
yeah, let's
Maybe
see.
I'll
Good,
like
'cause-
it.
yeah, we shall see. Okay, then. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let us know what you think. What do you think? Does Alien age well? Is it still a classic? Is it a masterpiece? Let us know what you think about it.
It's Julian full of shit. Stop
Yeah,
thinking about it. We people who really know movies, know it's a classic and it's perfect.
exactly. It is. Yeah, really. Ridley Scott's going to reach out and tell us why we're wrong. But anyway, yeah, let us know because Aliens is coming up next week. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, check out our rest of our program. We've obviously done before this. We did a post-apocalyptic um part 1 of the season. We've got part 2 coming after our little Alien interlude. And if you really like what we're doing on that, go and check out our Patreon link down below because we are doing our apocalyptic side mission where we are doing some sort of a couple of linked associated films linked with the films now, and we are going to be doing one for Alien as well. We're going to be doing a um an Alien bonus Patreon episode where we look at Alien
Isolation.
Thank you very much. The game that was turned into a computer-based film. So come and join us on the Patreon. Just £5 a month will get you those extra podcasts. Anyway, Julian, thank you very much. It's been a fascinating conversation.
Absolutely.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And we'll also see you on the next episode.
There's something very important I forgot to tell you.
What?
Don't cross the streams.